Well, good day, everybody. I'm Johnny Estes with CMI Gold Silver.
And I'm Shannon Estes.
Thanks for joining our show, Johnny on the Spot, where we're talking about all things precious metals.
CMI Gold and Silver has been in Phoenix since 1973. We are the oldest precious metals firm in the U.S.
Yeah, and you can reach us at our website at www.cmigs.com. That's cmigs.com.
Today
on Instagram.
I forgot about Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk about Instagram real quick.
Yes, Instagram, CMI Gold Silver, and on Facebook, CMI Gold and Silver.
Yeah, and we're also on YouTube. And so you can search YouTube for CMIGS, and you'll see all these videos and some other ones.
Yes. So today we're diving into a topic that shaped the entire global economy for over a century, the gold standard. And Johnny, I think a lot of people hear this term thrown around, especially in political debates and economic discussions. But today we're going to try to explain what it really means and help people understand why it matters.
Yeah, exactly. What's fascinating about understanding this topic is how it relates to back then and how it's going to relate today. But it's going to help people understand why precious metals is a right move today, and it's just not about history. You know, it's also about what happens when our governments disconnect from a backed currency.
Okay.
And tangible assets.
A real tangible asset.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's start at the beginning. Okay. So the gold standard is essentially a monetary system where a country's currency has a direct link to gold.
Correct. So under this system, paper money would then be exchanged for ounces of gold. And the government would maintain, it'd only print enough money to back what gold they had in their reserves. And what this did is this created a lot of stability because your paper money actually represented wealth.
Yes, it was the money represented actual gold that you could redeem. But let's go back even further. This wasn't a modern invention. This concept goes back to ancient civilizations. Rome, even China, they used gold and silver coins for trade for thousands of years. But the modern gold standard really emerged in the 1800s during the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, and I might point out that gold and silver have been used for currency since the beginning of time.
Yes.
But Britain was they were the first in 1821. They were tying the pound sterling to gold, to a fixed amount of gold, and then other countries followed because I've lost my place here. Sorry. Followed suit because it created trust in international trade. So no matter where you traded, you knew that whatever that currency was backed by gold, regardless of where you lived, you could always trade that in for ounces of gold.
Yes, which created a lot of long-term confidence, which allowed people to plan for the future, which in turn made everybody a lot of money, basically.
Sure.
So this time period is called the Classical Gold Standard Era. So we're talking the late 1800s through the early 1900s is this Classical Gold Standard Era. And at this time, the U.S., Germany, and other major economies all adopted it. They all tied their currency to some sort of gold backing. And currencies at this time were freely convertible to gold at fixed prices, which, as I mentioned, created this unprecedented stability.
Yeah, and this period of time saw massive global economic growth because essentially everybody was playing with the same set of rules, the same set of cards, basically. But here's what's important. Americans back then understood that their paper dollars were just receipts for gold or gold certificates. And the paper wasn't the value, but it was what was backing the paper, which was gold, and people had faith in that the gold was in the exchange for them to exchange.
And they could, if they wanted to, go and exchange those that paper for gold coins.
Correct.
And that's completely different from today's fiat currency, which has value only because the government says it does. Back at this time when we were on some sort of a gold standard, if you lost faith in the government, you could still get your gold. You could go take your paper and you could redeem it for gold, which this is where the phrase comes from, as good as gold.
It gets as good as gold, yeah. So then came along the Great Depression, and of course, everything changed. And if you remember the Great Depression, right before it happened, they said it was too big to fail. And of course, that was really hard times. But people essentially lost faith in the government's ability to convert their paper into gold. And so losing that faith, everybody was basically running to the gold windows and restoring their paper into gold. Well, the government saw that their gold reserves were starting to drain rather quick. So FDR needed to implement this massive spending program to address basically the depression. But the problem was the gold standard limited to how much money they could print.
Yes. So in 1933, FDR issued the famous Executive Order 6102, which required Americans to exchange their gold coins and bullion for paper currency at an equivalent of $20.67 per ounce. Americans were compensated. However, they could no longer own monetary gold. This opened the door for the government spending programs that FDR wanted to implement.
Correct, but here's the part that really shows how this worked. Just months later, after that gold window was closed, or the Reserve Act, there was a Reserve Act of 1934, and that raised the official price of gold from, $20.67 to $35 an ounce. Now that's a 75% right away of the devaluation of the dollar overnight. And it's nice to note that the national debt under FDR's 12-year reign, or 12-year tenure, grew 11.5 times because removing the gold constraint allowed them to do this money creation or massive printing.
Yes. So Americans couldn't own gold anymore, and the government maintained the gold reserves. However, foreign governments could still redeem dollars for gold, even though American citizens could not. This shifted us from a gold standard to a gold exchange standard. Just on a side note, although Roosevelt's executive order required Americans to turn in their gold and their coins and their bullion, foreigners continued to redeem paper dollars for several decades up until 1971, when President Nixon closed the gold window, which Johnny's going to talk about in a minute. So from the end of World War II to 1971, our gold reserves were cut in half because foreign governments were taking their paper dollars, U.S. dollars, and asking for gold. And it's generally believed that all the gold coins surrendered under Roosevelt's call-in were melted and refined into 3/9 fine gold bars, but that's not the case. It was to our government's advantage to give the foreigners gold coins instead of bullion bars, and this is why.
And why is that?
Well, at the time, if you remember, the official price of gold was set at $35 an ounce. So a foreign bank presenting, let's say, 35 million paper dollars received 1 million ounces if the Treasury delivered gold bullion. However, that when the Treasury delivered gold coins, these are the coins that were called in, with a face value
of $20.
The $20 gold
right.
pieces, but it was a face value valuated at $35 million because they were $35 a coin. It actually delivered only
967,500 ounces.
Yes, thank you. Saving an actual gold weight of 32,500 ounces.
Right.
Because these old U.S. gold coins, the Liberties,
the $20 libs and saints.
Yes, they each contain not a full ounce of gold. They're 0.9675 when you melt it all down. And of course, the smaller coins, the $10 and the $5 libs, etc., they all contain the same proportions of actual gold weight. Therefore, it was to the Treasury Department's advantage to give out U.S. gold coins instead of bullion bars.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So now, why was the government willing to trade with foreigners and not their own citizens? Well, it's for the reason of the Great Depression, being able to print money. But what this did was it maintained the confidence level of foreign nationals, foreign companies, to continue to do business with the U.S. And so it helped foreign countries to be comfortable with us, and it set us up on the dollar being the reserve currency of the world, which has been now for 40 years or so, right?
Well, the next 40 years. So it was the beginning of the end of gold backing. And as we'll talk about, it took another almost 40 years before it was completely done away with.
Yeah.
So after World War II, the global monetary system needed rebuilding. And global leaders gathered at a place in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods to establish a new international monetary system. And the resulting conference is known as the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944, which created a modified gold standard where currencies were tied to the U.S. dollar, and the U.S. dollar was in turn tied to gold at $35 per ounce.
Right. So like I mentioned, this made it that the U.S. dollar was the world's reserve currencies because foreign governments, foreign entities could still exchange their dollars for ounces of gold, basically. And with this system, it promoted some stability, especially for post-war reconstruction. And that was from 1944 to the early 70s. It helped facilitate the economic growth during that time.
Yes.
Getting us out of the Great Depression.
Yes. So the fixed exchange rates gave businesses confidence to trade internationally. The dollar's gold backing gave everyone confidence in this global system. But there was a problem brewing. The U.S. was printing more dollars than it had gold to back those dollars, especially with the Vietnam War spending and other domestic programs.
Yeah, so, excuse me, by the 60s, the U.S. was printing more dollars than they had gold to back it up. And other countries, they took note that was happening. And so they started to question if they were going to be able to trade their dollars for gold. And so then the trade deficits grew. We started to see inflation increase, and basically foreign governments were getting very nervous.
Yes, and so that's when President Nixon made his famous announcement on the 15th of August of 1971, and known as the Nixon Shock. He suspended the dollar's convertibility to gold, and this was supposed to be temporary, but it became permanent. Reports suggest that there were 5 European nations that were about to claim most of the gold that we held at that time at Fort Knox and at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and that's what prompted Nixon to do it.
Exactly. And they talk about the window, and the way I understand it, Shannon, is that there was an actual window you would go in and exchange your dollars for gold, which is why it was called the gold window. But essentially, Nixon closed that window before it could happen, and it prevented the draining of Fort Knox, which was kind of needed. But that also ended the Bretton Woods system, which, by the way, the reason they call it the Bretton Woods,
Bretton Woods, is because that's where the conference was held. Yes, in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, yeah. It ended that agreement, and so then we became a world of floating exchange rates, meaning currencies were valued and determined by the output of the government or how strong investors were comfortable with that currency.
So, for example, this is why when traveling, the dollar is stronger at some times than at others in foreign countries. So if you go to a country 2 years ago and your dollar bought you a lot of stuff, and then 2 years later you go back to the same country and the dollar is weaker and you have to spend more dollars to have the same type of vacation. This is exactly why.
Yeah, and sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. It just depends on the government's what their growth is and what their output is. So,
right. So since 1971, we've been living in a world of pure fiat currency, money that's not backed by anything except government decree. And the consequences have been very significant. The numbers really tell the story.
Yeah, so here's the numbers. So 34 years before Nixon closed the gold window, the money supply grew less than twofold. Okay, so since then, since 54 years of closing that window or the Nixon shock, the money supply has expanded. You ready for this? It's expanded 2,500%. Let that sink in for a second. 2,500%, 2,500%. I mean, that is just crazy. But this is why inflation is so important in our geopolitical and economic times right now.
That's why it's become a permanent fixture of our economy. For example, houses before the gold window closed that cost $20,000 in 1970 are now costing $400,000. Cars cost more than houses did 50 years ago. This is the direct result of unlimited money printing without gold backing. And this is why so many people are interested in returning to some form of a gold standard.
Right. Under the gold standard, governments can't just print unlimited funds, unlimited paper money. They're constrained by how much gold they have in the reserves. So essentially, if they create too many dollars, people simply swap those dollars for gold, and it'll drain the reserves. And so this is a force of fiscal discipline.
But there are downsides to a gold standard also.
Yes.
The main criticism of a gold standard is the inflexibility during economic downturns, kind of like what we just talked about with the Great Depression. If the economy is struggling, the government can't just print money to stimulate it. They're limited by those gold reserves. Also, governments just don't like limits on their authority.
Well, I mean, that's why FDR issued that Executive Order 6102 for sure. His massive spending programs required the ability to print those funds, and the gold standard would have prevented that. But the gold standard is great for citizens who want to have stable money. I mean, if you want to be on the gold standard, this is a great time for each person to be on the gold standard. But it's challenging for governments to be on that gold standard when they need to increase spending to stimulate the economy.
Yes, and here's another thing to understand, that even when we had a gold standard, governments found ways to work around it. FDR required the gold exchange, the recall of gold coins, where citizens would receive $20.67 per ounce. And then a few months later, then immediately revaluated gold to $35 per ounce. And that's a 75% devaluation for the dollar, even under a gold standard.
So here's the key. When governments control the monetary system, being paper, it eventually loses its purchasing power. And as your dad has taught us, Shannon, that the people that first acquire the money, so meaning the people that get the newly printed money from the governments, are the winners, and then it loses its value until it gets down to the bottom. But whether it's a devaluation under the gold standard or unlimited printing under fiat currency, governments will always find a way to take value out of the paper money, for sure.
Out of the paper dollar.
Yes.
And that's why physical gold ownership is so important today. You're not dependent on government promises or paper certificates. The gold standard worked for over a century because gold is a real, tangible asset that cannot be printed. When we abandoned it, it removed all constraints on money creation.
Yeah, and so since 1971, we've seen continuous inflation, massive debt accumulation, steady erosion of our purchasing power. But gold and silver are the same hedge today, so the same value hedge today as it was 100 years ago, and it protects us against the monetary mismanagement of our governments.
So the difference is now you can own it directly, instead of relying on government promises to be able to redeem paper for gold. At CMI Gold and Silver, we're not selling gold certificates or paper certificates or futures contracts. We're selling physical gold and silver that gets delivered directly to your door.
Correct. You get to own it. You get to touch it. You get to feel it. You put it in your safe or your safe deposit box, and it can't get devalued. I mean, yeah, the value comes and goes as the dollars rise and fall, but essentially, gold has been worth the same value today as it was hundreds of years ago.
Returning to a gold standard, as so many have talked about over the past probably 30 years or more, ever since the window closed in 1971.
Probably since 71.
Yes, is probably not possible because of the current national debt, among other reasons. So we admonish you to create your own gold standard by purchasing gold and silver.
Well, and I just might point out as evidence of that, if they revalued the 281 million ounces of gold at Fort Knox or whatever that number is to 4,000, it's rated right. It's valued at $42.22. I think I get that number wrong, but if they valued it to $4,000, that only represents 0.5% of the national debt, Shannon. And so, returning to the gold standard
is not really.
I mean, something seriously drastic can happen. We just don't see it.
It would be an enormous project. So we recommend that
you hold physical gold.
Hold physical gold
silver,
and create your own gold standard and protect your wealth with the proven power of precious metals.
Yeah. Well, we thank you for listening to our show here, Johnny on the Spot, Decoding Precious Metals. We're on KKNT 960, The Patriot, and we like doing this. Shannon and I were talking this morning that it is a bit of a challenge. Hopefully they're getting better, not so choppy, but we're going to do our best to try to continue to give you the facts. So future topics, we're going to talk about where's the gold? Where is it all? You know, the countries that own it and storage facilities, who hangs on to it, and maybe even a fun one about gold and silver in the movies, and give you kind of a reality check. So.
Yes, and so you can catch us here every Saturday morning at KKNT, 7:30 a.m., 960 The Patriot, or via streaming at patriotradio.com and your favorite podcast platforms. Missed episodes you can see are available on our YouTube channel. Just search CMI GS.
Yeah, and just keep in mind that we always have great deals, specials, close to nearest the spot. I love to credit my beautiful wife Shannon with this page, and there are people that live and breathe it, and so we just encourage you to check that page out. There's always going to be great deals, and just like your dad, I fully believe that the more metal that we can get into your hands, the American people, the better off we're going to be as a nation. I strongly believe that.
How can you go wrong with trading paper dollars for gold or silver?
I always ask myself that when somebody comes in.
Yes. Okay. So CMI, we've been around since 1973. My father, Bill Haynes, is the founder. And so we've been doing this for 53
years.
53
years, yeah.
Transparent pricing, non-commissioned brokers, and personal service that comes from being a family-owned business.
Yeah, and whether you're a first-time customer or a seasoned investor, we're here to help. Non-commissioned brokers, give us a call, 800-528-1380. That's 800-528-1380, and we're happy to help you with your decisions.
Yes. Thank you for joining us. Johnny on the Spot, KKNT 960 The Patriot. We'll see you next time for more insights into the precious metals market.